will provide some Dutch context for these policy recommendations. I will skip a few of the remarks because you already covered that. So let's start. Next slide, please. If all, I want you to take away from this presentation 3 related trends. And the first one is that solar is growing fast in Europe, but also in the Netherlands, but not fast enough. The second trend is these solar communities are evolving even during the course of our project. They have changed, they have grown. And the third trend is also new for that grid congestion is becoming widespread in the Netherlands. It's spreading quickly, almost as a virus, taken us a bit by surprise. But these 3 trends are connected. And the conclusion of my presentation is that solar communities do have a sustainable solution. And that would be the main takeaway. So the first trend, solar is growing fast. We installed more than 2.5 gigawatt last year. That's a conservative estimate. The number of solar cooperatives is also increasing, has doubled as of 2015. But their installed capacity amounts to almost 120 megawatts. So that's less than 2% of the total solar market. Now that's an important figure, because this could be a self-fulfilling prophecy if policymakers will say, "Oh, interesting development, but it's a very small part of for achieving our goals," and then not giving the full attention or pushing solutions, then you're getting us in a catch 22 situation that it's, yeah, you're missing one solution to the overall problem. Now, originally these projects were all small rooftop systems, and a trend is we now the last 2-3 years we see larger systems, like in the photo that was not in our project here. It's a solar community on the island of Ameland. It's on the airport there, 6 megawatt peak installed, and it's owned by the municipality, of course the corporation, and also an energy company invested in that. So other main support schemes beside the SDE are the net metering for smaller systems, which will be phased out after 2023, gradually, I should emphasize, and the postal code rose scheme for that's basically a tax reduction scheme for people who live nearby, sharing the same postal code. Now, the next slide, please. The projects involved in HEROES, they all use, of course, it started from small, they use the net metering, but they all are pioneers in the sense that they have a vision, and they were willing to put in the extra hours and effort during years, I must say. As mentioned in the previous presentation, these have become more professional. They're growing, size matters for your business case, and they are reacting in a very flexible way to changing circumstances and changing policy also. So in that sense, they have become specialists. At least these 3 projects, not only on the technology and on the community part, but also in energy law, and also how government operates. I think they are really the front runners. So in that sense, they're not a representative of the Netherlands. But we chose to have the most innovative projects in HEROES. So that said, they they all made use of the national regulatory sandboxes, which is an innovative experiment room with dispensation from the energy law behind the meter. Now, as said, I don't need to go into this. These energy communities in the Netherlands are expanding and getting more professional, moving into consultancy, advising other initiatives, adopting demand response in communication with the DSOs. Some are moving into the energy market, looking at the capacity market, also aggregating some of their assets and developing new energy services. Please, next slide. The photo is, of course, a traditional cooperative effort of launching a lifeboat in Ameland. So then we come to the grid issues, restraints before and behind the meter. During the course of this project, that has become an issue in the Netherlands. Before, when we started this project, it was mainly about the communication between the DSO and the projects of who's doing what are you up to, and now this new problem has evolved over the course of this project. Unexpectedly, for some not that much, for many were caught by surprise, but it also has to do with the institutional setup, how this is planned in the Netherlands. So there's some separate discussion on roles concerning this, also because the outlaw of renewables has been delegated to regional levels. So the regions, new energy regions, are playing a new role in this energy transition. Now, the main point here is that self-sufficiency in energy community projects can be a solution, very inclusive and cheaper from a societal perspective, cheaper solution for this problem. And in the HEROES project, with the tool developed by Criaro, we did some runs on the projects, and our findings were that a high percentage of self-consumption, at least over 60%, will compensate for phasing out net metering. The higher you go, the better it is, of course. Storage technology is a problem, is of course part of self-consumption. Independent of the technology is usually a bit costly, so their financing is an issue. But also Groene this project, they mentioned they are making use of storage on a neighborhood level together with the DSOs. So there's some innovative business strategies possible there. So for all new initiatives in the Netherlands, there's still some barriers. The first obvious one in the Netherlands is available service and the planning procedure. For larger systems, you do need a connection, a grid connection, and a guarantee of the grid operators that you will have one in time. For the communities, it's still a very steep learning curve, all the different aspects. I think that's one of the main ones, also reflected in the policy recommendations. Financing, I just mentioned, specifically for the upfront costs when you're not having a project yet, but you're already investing a lot of time and money. And one that is maybe not in this project, but certainly would be a recommendation and something to work on in a HEROES 2 project, perhaps, is the few initiatives that exist for self-consumption, and that has largely to do with an outdated tax regime in most countries. And of course, restrictive roles in the existing energy law behind the meter, not in these three projects we presented here, but all the other ones that don't have dispensation do confront this old energy law still. So that's my presentation. I think I'm in time, and just before the break, looking forward to the discussions.
Thanks, Otto. So we were just going to talk very briefly about these questions, and I'll hand over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Graham. Yes, I'm conscious of the time. We'll have that coffee break in 5 minutes. I think we'll try and deal with the first question before we have our coffee break. So thank you, Graham, Jack, and Otto. Yes, the first question you see here. So do you think that your national provisions adequately cover the main objectives of the stipulations of the Renewable Energy Directive? And I'd like to hear from different countries. So maybe we can firstly start with Greece. If Tassos or Vangelis would like to take the floor. I'll just mute myself.
Could you unmute Tassos, please?
Yes, just bear with me 1 second. Should be unmuted now, Tassos.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
This is Tassos from Greece. I'm happy to hear you now, and of course, I can answer to some questions. Actually, it's not very easy to answer this question because it would be better if we have first the presentation of Greece, which describe which is the situation about the energy community in Greece. Here in Greece, we have a completely different situation. We have a very good frame from energy communities, a very good regime, which give many priorities and many tools to energy communities. So it is a completely different picture from the picture that we have seen from the other countries.
Okay, thank you, Tassos. I'd like to hear from Spain, Priera. I'll give the floor to you, Andrea.
Thank you. So I think in Spain, what we have is not completely there, but we are getting there. So the situation right now with energy communities here is that they are still not contemplated in our legislation, but because we've moved in the past sort of 2 years from a very restrictive legislative framework to sort of a more open one right now, with the approval of a couple of royal decrees, one of which is on urgent measures for energy transition and consumer protection. We're sort of establishing the first steps in the political will towards sort of the positive legal development of renewable energies. And within that, we have, I guess, sort of opened a door to speed up the transposition of the European directives in Spain that will, recognize energy communities as, or that will recognize energy communities in our legislation.
Thank you, Andrea. What about the situation in Poland, Piotr? Richard.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is Piotr Nowakowski. I'm representing the Polish National Energy Conservation Agency, and trying to answer this question, I would like to admit that, in my opinion, we have done quite a lot to transpose the main stipulations of Renewable Energy Directive, and the crucial point was the amendment to the national renewable law that we introduced in August last year, and for the development of PV market in Poland, this step was essential. And the most important of changes, it was the extension of the prosumer definition also for enterprises, and this provision gives them opportunity to benefit from the net metering system on the same rules as individuals. So we have a new player in the field of prosumerism. Another provision is balancing and energy settlement periods and cycles are quite longer. So usually now we have annual settlement cycles for net metering system. And a very important thing that there is no necessity to prepare a construction design for the smallest micro installations up to 6.5 kilowatts. So many individual installations can be developed very easily and swiftly nowadays. And parallelly to the favorable legal framework, there is a number of support financial schemes that provide grant support for individuals, enterprises. And if we take a look at the figures, at the end of 2018, we had 500 megawatts of total installed capacity in Poland, and now we have reached 2 gigawatts. So there is a proof that this market is actually developing quite swiftly, and I would like to also mention about energy cooperatives, because some kind of new provisions and privileges was also given for this kind of initiatives, because nowadays energy cooperatives can benefit from the net metering system and on the same basis as prosumers, but on slightly less profitable conditions than typical prosumers. But anyway, and this is a new area, and this area creates many opportunities for other different actors as energy aggregators and some entities providing balancing services. So I believe we are on a good track, and we need to implement some other provisions, but maybe in the next part we could talk about this more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you, Piotr. And Vitas Juras, what's the situation in Lithuania?
Vitas speaking. Yes, but about the situation in Lithuania, I will tell in my presentation a little later. But generally, I can say that legislation of energy communities came to force only from 1st of July of this year. Then we have only 8 days of action of this legislation. Therefore, energy communities movement only on this in starting position in Lithuania. But no, yes, and more I will explain in my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Vitas. We look forward to hearing more later. And quickly from Dana, Germany, Moritz.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Moritz Robers from the German Energy Agency, and I'm going to be trying to be short. In Germany, I think we already have a fairly developed market for energy communities. There are already a few provisions in the German law that cover objectives of the RED2. For example, it is already possible for individuals to produce and consume its own renewable energy. Moreover, there's already a definition of citizen energy cooperatives, and yes, but there are, however, also a few objectives that have not been addressed so far by the German law, such as collective self-supply and renewable energy communities and energy sharing. And for example, in Germany today, all producers of renewable energies must sell their electricity directly or indirectly at the electricity exchange. Otherwise, they lose the right of to a feed-in tariff or market premium, and only individual self-supply, as well as the tenant electricity, but this is sort of a different approach, offer incentives to consume the generated electricity locally without using the public grid, and this actually limits the possibilities of using the electricity regionally. And this is why we hope that by implementing renewable energy communities and the fact that they are entitled to share within the renewable energy community, we hope that in future the collective energy consumption will also be possible, because so far only the collective energy producing has been made possible. So yeah, this was a very brief overview. Thanks.
Thank you, Moritz. Sorry, I'm sure you're already your coffee, but quickly to hear from the Netherlands. So Otto or Vido. Okay. Energy Saving Trust, then the UK. Graham, did you want to say a few words just before we go for coffee?
Yeah, I can very quickly say, obviously the UK is in a, sadly, personal view, unique position in that we're leaving, but there is a team within the relevant government department working on Article 22. I think overall we feel that Wales and Scotland has a pretty strong supportive framework. England has a framework that has slightly less resource and slightly less scope. But I think the key area that we need to work on is the access to markets and the actual the kind of business model side. So in some ways we're kind of the reverse of Greece. Greece has that strong framework, you know, that creates a market for community energy, whereas in the UK we kind of have quite a strong community energy sector and good support, at least in particularly in Scotland and Wales, to set up. But it's more difficult to make the business model work. That was it from me.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. I suggest we break for coffee now. So if we have a 10, yes.
I'm a bit earlier than I promised. Job Svens.
Hi, Job.
As Otto and Vido did not react, I think I can say 3 words about it.
Thank you.
The funny thing in the Netherlands is we are a bit behind. No, we are. Comparing to other legislations, we are pretty close to what Europe wants, but we have the experimental arrangement. And it was funny to see this started in 2015 and comes very, very close to what the RED2 and also the energy market directives are prescribing. So if we manage to copy the experimental arrangement, the sandbox that we have in the Netherlands, into legislation, we will probably end up very close to what Europe wants the member states to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Job. Then I suggest we break for coffee now for 10 minutes rather than 15 minutes. So if we come back at 10 to 12, if that's okay with everybody. So enjoy your coffee and see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. I see we have Ludwig and Job have joined us now, so welcome to you both. I'm very happy that you could join us for this webinar. I just had a phone call from Vido. Unfortunately, he's experiencing some problems, and so he's not able to. We're not able to hear him. So that's. I was very glad that you could jump in there, Job. Thank you for that. Yes, I hope that you're all back from the coffee break now. It's a bit difficult to see when we're not in the room, and we've all been given strict instructions to turn off our videos if we're not speaking, so it makes it difficult to see if everybody's here. But Michael, do you think we should make a start? Do you have an overview of, yeah, I mean, you can't see if people have gone to the kitchen to get their coffee either, can you?
Not, unfortunately not, no, but looking at the number of attendees that we have online at the moment, I think we're in a good place to proceed with the webinar.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Well, again, welcome back to the second session. As we explained earlier, we're going to look at some best practices across Europe, some examples. And I'd like to first give the floor to Ludwig Karg, who's CEO of Baum Consult, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Taskforce on Energy Communities. So the floor is yours, Ludwig. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, and everyone for inviting me. Maybe a sentence on what it is, and thanks for Rebecca for pronouncing Baum correctly. Baum stands for tree in Germany, and this is what we are mainly. We are a consultancy and we are a research institution that deal a lot with municipal development, sustainable development, and so on. And in the past years, we did a lot in European energy research and innovation. And at one point of time, we were sitting in Brussels, and someone asked who would like to lead this task force on the energy communities, and I said, this is going to be interesting. So I said yes. And Lene Peters also said yes, and since then the two of us are the so-called chairpersons of the Task Force on Energy Communities, and I would like to explain a bit more on what it is. Fortunately enough, I do not need to explain what energy communities are. That is for the first time. This is a new experience. So if you can switch to the next slide, please. What is it? It was provoked by the bridge. Most of you probably know that. This is this cooperation of EU Horizon 2020 funded projects with various working groups, and what they decided at Bridge is that we need a cross-cutting task force on energy communities. Mainly when we were sent out from Bridge, our task was to better understand and what's going on member state level, and to collect the inspiring examples and analyze the legal and existing upcoming frameworks, etc. So more or less what you are doing at the same time. And what the Commission expects from this task force is clearly recommendations as to what can they do, mainly in terms of innovation support or even research to make these energy communities happen. If you click once, please, on the right side, you see a sister organization, Smart Energy Systems ERANET. This is a joint programming platform of some 30 funding agencies on member state level in some 23, 24 countries in Europe. And they are calling and financing transnational projects on smart energy systems. And I happen also to be the head of the knowledge community management in this group. And there we had created a working group, I think 2 years ago, on regional matters. Sounds nice. It's about regional matters, but also saying regionality matters. And there we also had a task force, local energy communities. And I think this was before the directives came out. So more or less what I'm telling you, the task force has two parts to that. One is this bridge task force for the European level, and this Smart Energy Systems Task Force, and we jointly cooperate, mainly in my person because I'm heading the both. So if you switch to the next one, what is it all about? What we want to do is that people participate. I mean, you are calling now and you managed to get these webinars. We want to implement an ongoing process of people that want or are able to support the transposition, or even better, the implementation of energy communities. What we happen to have is from this Smart Energy Systems Aeronet, we have a platform, a knowledge platform, and you might to take a note. It's easy to remember, www.smartgrids+eu. There you find us. This is a community place, a co-creation place, a knowledge management place, and the entire task force activity is going on this platform. You find your way, you find living documents, you find the existing knowledge you can contribute with text, with comments, with studies, and so on. So we invite you guys and everybody else to contribute on that. Next slide, please. When we started with the task force, we said, okay, what are we going to talk about? And for every of these questions, we set up a living document on this very Expera platform and said, okay, we want to collect the answers of the crowds to these questions. I mean, the first question is, what are energy communities all about? I mean, a little bit explaining what the directives really mean. Then we discuss, okay, what are the benefits? Are they somehow superior to what everybody has been doing before? Then also, what is the benefit to the grids and so on, and what tariffs would we need to remunerate positive contributions to the system? So all these questions that people frequently ask, and we would like to give the answers. But then number 8 also says, okay, what are the requirements? I mean, to implement such an energy community means something, and most probably also need quite some ICT solutions. So we also describe what are the ICT solutions that the energy communities need to be implemented and operated. And then immediately, and that was something that came up in an early phase, people are very anxious to display their data or share their data. Obviously, you need some data to manage such an energy community, but should they go outside? Should data go outside the energy community or not? So this is one of the tricky questions. And finally, the number 10, document. And if you go there, you will find the description of the situation as far as we know. We ask you because we do not know all the countries yet, and there's a big survey going on, and I will tell you in a minute, some countries are still open. We need contact to your ministries to do our survey, to do our interviews. But at the end, we would like to have a description of the national framework for energy communities, whether it be REX or KEX, and you will find that in that document. Number 11 is the cases you can contribute. You are very welcome. And number 12 is an ongoing process of giving recommendations. So this is what we do. If you want, switch to the next slide. Yeah. So after having worked some 9 months or so, we dared to give some first recommendations, but these are now, I think, 6 months old. Various recommendations. I'm not going to read them to you. You will find them in this living document if you make your way there, or I can send you. But I would like to stress the number 11, because what our experts said, and the people and the stakeholders that we talked to, they said there is a tendency, and it's also somehow intended by the directives, that energy communities, whether they be renewable or citizen energy communities, have one goal only, namely the collective self-consumption, and vice versa. And if you want to do self-consumption, you need the energy communities. You don't need energy communities to do the self-consumption. This is not true. And it's also not true that energy communities have one goal only, namely collective self-consumption. And that's why, if you switch to the next slide, we said, let's take a broad approach. We identified 5 plus 5. You can show the next step as well. We identified 10 classes in total, different, say, flavors of energy communities. The first 1, 2, 3 are more or less the different flavors of self-consumption. The number 4 is then a specific discussion where people have set out to develop energy positive districts, which is a more like technical approach. But then we said, okay, why shouldn't we talk about who operates such a positive district? And we would most probably end up at something like an energy community. Obviously, when you talk energy islands, whether they are real islands or islands inside the entire system, you are also in the field. In that case, you most probably were talking about microgrids. And so you understand, in an island, I mean, obviously you need to also somehow control the grid, which is not necessarily the case in all other energy communities. So, but the first 5 are more or less what people are talking about when they talk energy community. But then we started talking to utilities, and you know, and you hear that I'm from Germany. In Germany, we have roughly 1,000 municipal utilities. And they said, okay, what the heck are you doing? I mean, we are energy communities since dozens or hundreds of years. We represent and we supply our communities, our villages, our cities. So why don't you call us energy communities? And so we started discussing what is the role of the Stadtwerke, of the municipal utilities in this discussion. And then we found people that said, okay, is it an energy community when we just collect money and jointly invest it somewhere? Or, for example, if we only collect the money and invest it into energy efficiency means locally, for example. And this is all of these flavors and classes are to some degree supported by the directives. Mainly when you come to the number 9, the collective even expresses it, the directive even talks about collective service provision. So you might create an energy community that does nothing else but aggregating flexibilities and bring it to a local or global marketplace. This is also under the directive. So what I'm saying, it's a very broad approach. And the number 10 then is when people decide to just implement blockchain to monitor the self-supply or something. And then you are beyond all these traditional cases. So what we do, we look at all these classes, and if you switch to the next slide, we have examples for all of these. And just recently there was a big event in the framework of the mission in Austria week, and we collected for every of these 10 classes, we had one example that has already implemented it. So there are these examples, and you will find these examples on the platform. So next slide, I have to hurry, it's 10 minutes only. Just 2 ideas taking us a bit beyond this traditional idea of self-supply communities. This is a picture that we created. We are involved in various European projects, as I said, and we have been in GoFlex, we are in Fever, we are in EdgeFlex, and in all these, we have the municipal utility of Wunsiedel in Germany, Bavaria. And there we discussed what is the role of a utility in this entire discussion, and we identified 2 cases. On the left side, we said, okay, in this area where they supply and operate the grid, maybe we will have an energy community or multiple of these energy communities. And it's even in the interest of the utility to have them, because they said, okay, our business case in the future will be giving support service to these multiple energy communities. This is our future in our utility. And they said, maybe it's even the other case, we are a part of the energy community. So they are a small utility, so they would even fit in the directive most probably. They claim, why aren't we also a member of the community? And they call themselves a super peer then in a peer-to-peer trading in this very area. So what I'm saying, we also want to and we need to discuss the role of existing supply and grid operation utilities, not only in Germany. So this is a flavor that we try to discuss. And if you switch to the next slide, just recently that we closed a project called Allies. The Allies project is exactly where people create cooperatives. We did that in Germany, in Hungary, in Poland. They created so-called LFIs, local financing entities for energy efficiency. cooperatives that collect money, get some money from other funds, put it into regional energy efficiency means building new heating systems for the schools or for local businesses and so on. This is also something that is under the directives. So when we transpose it, and this is what we claim in this task force, when countries transpose the directives, please don't forget that there are many flavors, not just self-supply. Next, and I think last slide. Yeah, okay, one other input, and that's something that we discussed a lot in the task force, and I'm reading here from the market directive. Somewhere it says that everything aims to recognize certain categories and so on in order to provide them with an enabling framework. And it does not say to provide them with an enabling regulatory framework. It says enabling framework. And if you switch to the next slide, there are multiple, say, enablers for these 10 classes. Enablers, of course, like a clear legal framework. You click once more, then it's a bit larger. It's the clear framework. Maybe you need financial support to establish it or to operate it. You need capacity. Maybe you need a network where you do knowledge exchange between the communities. You need electrical technology. You need software and so on. Of course, you also need a clear positioning of the ESOs and TSOs. And what we are doing at this point of time, and you are invited to follow us, we are doing a big survey in all countries and all communities, stakeholder groups in Europe. What is it exactly that makes this enabling framework for the various flavors or classes of the energy communities? So this takes us beyond all the discussions that you typically have when you discuss energy communities. So next slide, and I think then we are really done. Join us, follow us, support the task force, get involved. You can take a note on this one, then you find our platform. You can start commenting and editing our living documents on all these topics. You can participate in the surveys. And you can help us creating these recommendations. And I think this is where we will closely cooperate with the heroes. If you click twice, this is two active activities going on. One is, as I said, this survey on the national frameworks. We still ask you to give us information to whom to talk in legislation about this transposition. We need participants, and everybody can participate in this needs analysis with this big table of what is it that energy communities need to be established, to be supported, to live, to operate, and so on. So these are the actual cases where you can join us. Please do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ludwig. Sorry to have to limit you to 10 minutes there. Very, very interesting information, and we look forward to engaging in discussion with you in this task force. I'd like to pass the floor to Jim Cardy, who's going to tell you about the Welsh Government Energy Service programme. The floor is yours, Jim.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me and see me?
Yeah,
I assume so.
Loud and clear, Jim. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, I've got my phone's playing. Okay. So thanks to everyone thanks to you Hero Teams for inviting me to speak today. My name is Jim Cardy, and I am a senior manager on the Welsh Government Energy Service. So I'm just going to give a quick 10-minute overview of the Welsh Government's approach to supporting community solar, some of the policy drivers in place to support our work and support the technology, and just give a kind of quick practical overview of our work and how the service encourages development of locally owned power in Wales, and some of the impact of our programme and the policy drivers in terms of install capacity. Okay, so if we just move on to the first slide, please. So there's a long history of support of community energy in Wales over the last decade. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the previous programs that supported and led to our work today. So back in 2010, we set up an EVRO program. So this was a Welsh Government program using European structural funds, and really it was really in the nascent early days of community energy, focusing on helping social enterprises in Wales develop their own projects and set up appropriate business structures to help develop those projects. So there's a team of full-time development officers supporting this work and really working with communities, really closely with communities with sets of toolkits and shared learning on finance, on project development, different ownership models. So there was a set of different models like owner-operator, where the project was led and development was led by the community, helping them with commercially led projects and joint ventures and things like that. So yeah, really early on in the community energy world, but it was a successful program which led to that ran for 5 years and led to the local energy service in 2015. So this ran for several years. Was kind of moving on a bit from the setting up these groups to really the focus was on maximising the level of retained benefits for community energy, and provided a bit more technical support in a bit more detail. We also ran a partnership portal to help shared learning for community groups, and this led to the Welsh Government Energy Service, which is what I'll talk about in the next few slides, so set up in 2018. So in terms of the Welsh Government's policy goals, our overall approach is to identify, prioritise and focus resources on projects that have the greatest impact on Welsh Government's targets. So there's just very quickly, there's a public sector target for decarbonisation by 2030. There's the Locally Owned Renewable Generation Act, aiming to get 1 gigawatt of locally owned power into local hands by 2030. And there's some kind of much more top level environmental acts, for example, the Environment Wales Act and the Wellbeing of Future Generations. So these are kind of higher level acts of Welsh Government to ensure that all public bodies act in a way that takes the long-term impact of decisions into account for the people of Wales and future generations. So of course, community energy and renewables plays a big role in delivering those acts. So if we could move on. In terms of our support, we have limited resources, so we have to prioritise our programme to have the biggest impact. So we aim to contribute to 2030 carbon reductions, as I mentioned, increase capacity of groups and capability, so not only lead the projects, but improve the motivation of groups to do the work themselves. And we should aim to balance our work between providing direct support to communities and enabling particularly local authorities to take ownership of the decarbonisation challenge for the long term. Okay, we can move on. So the Welsh Government Energy Service is a large programme with approximately 20 to 30 development managers and senior managers. We've got a broad range of work streams to deliver these aims. Given this is community solar, I've just highlighted 3 of the work streams. 3 of the kind of 7 are on community solar. So there's building mounted renewables on community buildings and public sector buildings. We help develop solar farms and large-scale building-mounted PV, and also real focus on financing for projects. So taking community groups through from development to actual finance and supporting the build stage. If we could just move on. So this is to kind of give an idea of the scale of the work and the different areas we work on. We currently have 220 projects that have been supported or are currently being supported by the programme, and 76 of those are community or locally owned solar PV projects. So we're a small country of 3 million, and really this is the kind of major programme that helps deliver community renewables in our nation. just to give you an idea of the kind of impact of our team and service over the last, this is under the local energy programme and the Welsh Government Energy Service. These are the type of megawatts that we've delivered on the ground. So approximately 10 megawatts of ground mount and rooftop solar for a programme this size. And our current pipeline is around 26 megawatts. So there's several large, really big projects we've got in our in build stage at the moment, and yeah, really kind of pushing the service and pushing the sector in Wales. I know I'm squeezed for time, so I'm just going to. This is. Happy to answer questions on this later, but essentially we take all projects through from concept and feasibility stage right through to implementation. If you could just quickly move on, I'll just talk about each stage and just some of the work we do. So on a concept stage, a group or an organisation might come to us with some land or community building or a large office, and we would do initial scoping, potentially early rooftop designs, and kind of really get to grips with the feasibility of the project. Is this project a goer? Is it what's the on-site demand like? And doing some kind of early stage design, and then we give that back to a group or an organisation so they can kind of digest the numbers and look at the viability and the kind of costs involved, and really give a really early stage look at the viability of a community project. So I've just put a couple of images in here. If you were in my presentation last week, you'll be familiar with these, but this is an analysis of some solar next to a rail line. If you skip forward, instead we would develop this type of these type of designs at an early stage to help a group kind of visualize the project and kind of bring it to life. The next stage, obviously, after an early stage feasibility, if the project looks good, we would then our team of experts would take a group through business case development. So if it was a community group, we would provide them with the financial modelling in a kind of easy to understand format. If it was a local authority developed project, we would look for, at this stage, for getting senior commitment from senior management in the organisation or a sponsor agreement. So this is just to kind of solidify the project and give an idea of the kind of capital costs involved, and ensure that if we were going to move the project forward, it's got buy-in at a senior level. We, as a service, we can bring in additional expertise if we need to. So we've got a bank of contractors and technical experts outside of the service. I'm sure you know, in developing renewable energy can get quite technical and complicated. So we're really able to answer any really complicated questions that might arise as a result of a project. Funding is obviously always a big barrier. The Welsh Government have put in place a number of programmes to help fund projects that are outside of the kind of commercial market. So one example is a programme called the Wales Funding Programme. For local authorities and public sector organisation in Wales, they can access interest-free finance for their projects. So these are zero interest loans to build out projects. For community groups, there's support from what we call a local energy fund. This is administered by the Development Bank of Wales, and these are flexible loans designed to be sympathetic to community groups and community causes, knowing that there's higher risk in development than potentially a commercially developed project. So we work closely with the organisation and the bank to develop a business case and really present wider social benefits on top of that to obtain funding for projects. And there's various other sources of funding as well that we can draw on. And one of the big, in the community sector, one of the big ways we raise money is through community share offers. So often a project will get finance at an early stage, get the project built, and then it's able to raise shares at a later date when the project is in place. And we find that's a more successful way of raising money after the project is built. And I think I'm almost out of time. Just very quickly, just giving you an example of some of the scale of projects we work on. This is an 8.5 megawatt ground mount system in the capital city in Cardiff. This is a £7 million project developed by the local authority in Cardiff. So yeah, quite reasonable scale. We helped the council develop this project from scratch. And if you just move on one more. This is the largest largest rooftop system in Wales, which is going to be 100% community owned, and this is in Newport, a small city in South Wales, on their velodrome. So just to give you an idea of the scale, I think I'm just going to cut short there because I've just got one last slide. In fact, yeah, just multiple large ground mount systems all across Wales that we are supporting at the moment. So yeah, I hope that gives you a quick overview of how Welsh Government supports community solar in Wales, how our service operates to deliver megawatts on the ground, and yeah, happy to answer any questions later on or by email about how the policy is implemented and the project is implemented. Okay, I'm going to finish there so we don't run over too much. Contact details there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Garen. Sorry, that was a bit of a quick run through of our project. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Jim. So we're going to move now from the UK to Greece, and I'd like to give the floor to Vangelis Metaxos from CRES, who will tell us more about the energy communities in Greece. The floor is yours.
Hello, this is Vangelis from CRES. We will describe you what it is available and allowable according to our framework for energy communities in our country. Next slide, please. So according to the government gazette, which is what you see here, double click please to open the other two pictures. The energy communities are defined as civil law partnerships with the exclusive aim of promoting the social economy, encouraging solidarity and innovation, responding to energy needs, promoting energy sustainability in production, storage, and self-consumption and distribution, increase energy efficiency, final consumption at the local and regional level. The members can be natural persons, local authorities, municipalities or regions, legal entities governed by public law, and any legal entities, enterprises of any size. Next slide, please. They are allowed to perform the following activities. They can, which are generation, storage, self-consumption, or sale of electricity, or heating, cooling from renewable or cogeneration, production of electricity or heating, cooling from biomass, biowaste, or biofuel, procurement of appliances and installation with increased energy efficiency, electric vehicles and vehicles that use natural gas, biofuel, or liquefied gas for energy. They are allowed also to the distribution of electricity or heating, cooling on a local level. They can supply electricity and natural gas on a local level. They can manage the final electricity consumption. They can manage also desalination of water through renewable energy sources projects, systems of desalination, which can be done in remote islands, small islands. And also they are allowed to the development and management of fueling station, which could be liquefied natural gas, liquefied gas or biofuel, as well as the management and transport on the local level. Next slide, please. The only restrictions of this framework are that at least 50% plus one member shall be associated with the place where the EC has registered offices. Energy communities are generally non-profit. In case they consist of more than 15 members, the majority of whom are natural persons, they may be also profit-driven. And each member, independently of the shares that they may possess, has only one vote to the General Assembly. And the minimum number of members for an energy community is as follows: 5 public or private law legal entities or individuals, 3 local authorities, or 3 members where at least 2 are local authorities. Next slide, please. The incentives given are the priority for the issue of production license, environmental terms and connection offer. That is in the case of a non-profit energy community. Exemption or discount of administrative costs, fees, guarantee checks, etc. Competitive bidding process is not required for installations below 6 megawatts for wind and 1 megawatt for PV. And also for PV installations, a special tariff is foreseen, which is 10% higher than the average price of last year's competitive bidding process. That is in the case that there is energy selling. Next slide, please. So we're giving some examples here of what can be done according to the legal framework. So an energy community could be established with the aim to install a wind park or a solar PV plant of 6 or 1 megawatt maximum installed power respectively, and sell the energy to the energy market through a PPA. An energy community could install a PV plant in order to offset multiple energy bills through virtual net metering services, which means the production and consumption facilities are not behind the same meter device, and there is no obligation to keep balance between production and total consumption in real time. So no need for demand-side management or storage facilities. Also, the owners, users of a multifamily building can establish an energy community and install a community-owned PV plant in order to serve their total annual electricity needs. The supplier offsets the energy bill of its tenant by virtually sharing the production of the PV system according to the rates given by the jointly acting renewable self-consumers. That is through the virtual net metering services. Next slide, please. Another example could be 3 municipalities that can establish an energy community and install a large PV power plant sited in the rural area due to lack of space in the urban city space, which is connected to the medium voltage network. The energy is virtually shared among consumption points of public interest, connected either to the medium or to the low voltage network. And the energy, this type of energy community may choose to donate an amount of energy to vulnerable consumers or citizens who can be termed as being under energy poverty. So this was the second example. Next slide, please. Another example could be a group of citizens and local enterprises in a non-interconnected island can organize an energy community and establish a microgrid by installing RES, storage, and ICT facilities so that the energy is shared among the members of this community. Small and medium-sized islands constitute ideal prices for the development of such an example due to the high energy costs and due to the need for higher RES penetration. Excess of energy can be sold to the market through a PPA, so the EC increases its self-adequacy, contributes to the security of energy supply, while its facilities can be used by the network operator for auxiliary services. Next slide, please. And another example is companies that intend to install new PV plants and connect them downstream of a congested transformer. They can establish an energy community and install storage facilities, with the aim being to absorb the energy of their PV plants at midday hours with high radiation and low load. EC will inject the stored energy into the grid at hours with high load. In this respect, from the grid perspective, the storage facilities are an alternative to avoid the expensive and in some cases infeasible installation of a new transformer. At the same time, this energy community may be compensated. And now we can, by providing auxiliary services to the operators, we can have voltage control to the DSO, frequency control to the TSO. And next slide, please. The obstacles to drive energy communities forward, even though the legal framework in relations here and it's sound, we can say, is that there is lack of campaigns to motivate citizens and local authorities, private and public law entities to be actively involved. Lack of detailed information to the board of the public entities and authorities that are responsible for the approval or the rejection of big projects, such as the establishment of PV energy communities, regarding the changes of the new energy regimes, their restrictions, and their economic profitability. The establishment of non-profit PV energy communities from public entities and authorities encountered problems to raise capital for their activities. Absence of specific financing mechanism for financing municipalities and other public entities and authorities to develop such communities. And finally, the permitting procedures for profit PV energy communities from individuals and enterprises is delayed compared to other high priorities PV investments in non-profit PV energy communities, net metering and virtual net metering PV investments. So this is from me, and thank you very much for listening, and we'll probably have some time later on to discuss some of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And please don't forget, I see some of the questions have been taken up within the chat function, but please continue to ask your questions in the chat. I'd like to hand the floor to Helen Seagrave from DSO in the UK, Electricity Northwest, and her role is to engage with energy communities. So the floor is yours, Helen.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the Community Energy Manager at Electricity Northwest, and I'm going to just spend my time this morning just telling you a bit about our community and local energy strategy, which we've developed with stakeholder input and was first published in June 2018. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to at first introduce Electricity Northwest. So formally, we're actually still a DNO, a distribution network operator. The DNOs in the UK are transitioning to DSOs through a process, and that's been managed through a project called the Open Networks Project, which if anybody is interested in how we're doing that, you can find out more details about on the Electricity Network Association's websites. But obviously we are, as you would expect, we own and operate the electrical infrastructure of the northwest of England, and you've got a little pull out there to just show you exactly whereabout we are. So as you all understand, our role in community energy includes grid connections, contracting for flexible services, and also making sure the network is able to accommodate the forecasted uptake in low carbon technologies, of which community energy obviously wants to be part of. Next slide, please. So one of the first things I did when I started in this role to talk to community and local energy groups was to create a definition. Now, I know it means different things to different people, but I thought for the purposes of our conversations and for our context, it was good to have a definition so both sides could be clear about what we are talking about. From our point of view, we've grouped together community energy and local energy because these are customers and stakeholders who are connecting or want to connect low carbon technologies to the distribution part of our networks. And therefore, from our point of view, they present us with similar challenges, although I appreciate there are differences in their approach to their projects. And how we've defined them is community energy is around the community ownership, so community-led projects or initiatives that can reduce, manage, generate or purchase energy, and that they focus on their engagements and benefits to the local area. Local energy does the same, but it tends to have more of a commercial ownership or local authority ownership and isn't necessarily as embedded within the community energy. But like I said, from our point of view, they require us to look at our internal processes and services in a very similar way, which is why we treat them as one. Next slide, please. So in our region, we've got quite a diverse set of community energy groups. We've just published our State of the Sector survey for 2019, which told us that we've got 32 community energy groups across our region. Jointly, they own 17.5 megawatts of community of generation capacity. That's split across wind, PV and hydro. This slide shows just some of the examples of the groups that we've got in our region. There's quite a few that are sort of single site hydro focused groups, some of which have been operating for a number of years. And then there's others that, and you can see examples on there like Halton Loon Hydro, Tors Hydro. And then there's others that are doing a wide variety of activities, such as Carbon Co-op, who look at non-generation based activities. And Cumbria, Community Energy Cumbria, who look at things like rooftop PV and work closely with CAFS, whose logo, Cumbria Action for Sustainability, is next to them, and they look more at energy efficiency with households and working with fuel people who are suffering from fuel poverty. Next slide, please. So yes, just to reiterate the point that whilst this seminar is obviously focusing on community-owned PV, and that is certainly where the groups that work on generation projects are focusing in our region at the moment. Both sort of, we're seeing trends for rooftop solar, which is, has been discussed, works if you've got a large percentage of on-site use, but we're also seeing a group starting to look at larger ground-mounted schemes as well in our region. But as a sector in the round, groups aren't just looking at generation, so they are diversifying and growing by looking at other aspects of energy that they can provide for their local community. Next slide, please. So how did we decide where we should take action and what we should do as a DNO to support community energy and local energy groups? Well, we asked our stakeholders what their main issues and barriers are and where they felt we should take action. And through that engagement process, we identified a list of sort of the top 3 areas where community and local energy groups felt we could and should take action. So as you can see, they are listed here. And the first one was around access to us as a company, making it easier to get in touch with us, making that time more face-to-face time, early engagement on projects, as part of being easy to get in touch, having a dedicated point of contact, but then also being willing to collaborate on projects and help community and local energy groups with that technical understanding of where connections could be easier, how to go through our connections process, and just make sure that they could understand what we're talking about. We work in quite a technical industry. We're used to speaking to commercial customers that understand our language, but community and local energy groups represent sort of a new group of customers who are very well informed, especially when it comes to the motivations and the reasons for low carbon technology uptake, and also the policy and sort of the incentives for renewable energy. But as an industry, we can get stuck in talking very technically, and we just need to make sure that we vary our language and make it easier for other customers to interact with us. Stakeholders also felt we could potentially play a role in the issues they're facing with financing projects, particularly around developing viable business models where the connection cost feeds into that, and what we can do to help with the cost of connection, not necessarily paying for it, but just looking at different ways of connecting to our network that might have different costs associated with them. But also, was there anything we could do to help with finance support? We were asked for that as well. And then the third area is around regulation. There was a feeling, or there is a feeling, that the regulatory regime in our region, which has been in our country, which has been talked about, doesn't necessarily suit and enable community local energy, and I think that relates to small scale low carbon technologies in general. So is there anything we can do as an industry to help people overcome that? And I'll just go through our response to those issues and what we're doing, or what we have been working on for the last couple of years in my next few slides. Could we move on, please? So what have we done to make it easier for customers to get in touch with us? So we have a dedicated point of contact. That's me. I've developed the community and local energy section of our website, so it should be very easy to go on there and see how to get in touch with us, what we're doing for this sector, and various different ways we're supporting. We've increased our outbound communications to make it easier to understand what our role is, examples of other projects we're working with, and how we can support the sector. We have a quarterly newsletter, produce an annual report, and we've done a number of guides to sort of expand on some areas, such as how to connect to the grid and how to work with DNOs on innovation. And we've done those with other DNOs and the Electricity Network Association, because they're common issues that the sector is facing. And then we've also created more opportunities to meet us. So I run quarterly engagement events called Community Connects. Normally they're in-person networking events, but we did our first online one last week, because the same as everybody else, we can't meet up at the moment. And I do a lot, try and do as much of this as possible, sort of attending and presenting at events so people can meet us and hear what we're up to. Next slide, please. What we've done on the finance side is we have an annual seed fund, which we've called our Empowering Our Communities Fund. We're just about to launch it in September for the 3rd year, but so far we have supported 12 projects in our region. Annually, we have up to £75,000 to provide, and that we give that out in chunks of up to £15,000 per project. So far, yeah, we've supported up to 12 projects across a number of different areas of our region, and if you want to find out more about those, there's case studies about them all on our website. And we've also run a number of workshops, so our Community Connects engagement events, we've focused a couple of those on the finance issue, both how to raise finance for projects, but also how you just get your head around all the different resources that are out there, because there is actually quite a lot of support for community and local energy in this country, but it's quite patchy and not necessarily easy to work out what's relevant for you. And all of those resources from our events are on our website, so you can go back and refer to them after the event. Next slide, please. So on regulation, we held again a Community Connects event focused on regulation and local supply last February. This wasn't an event where we said we've got the answers and we're going to come and talk to you about it. This was an event where we really wanted to hear from stakeholders what their issues were and try and understand them in a bit more detail. And I invited, so we had a number of people from the sector in our region talking to us, and then I invited colleagues from our regulation business just to listen and hear those issues, and then try and provide a bit of that industry perspective back based on their understanding of how the industry works. I think that was a very productive session. We focused on local supply because we felt that that was where regulation is acting as the biggest barrier to community energy. Out of that, we agreed to produce a quarterly regulation and policy update, which just highlights the changes that have gone on in the last quarter that are relevant for community and local energy, to give stakeholders a way of just going straight to the points that are relevant to them, because there is so much going on across the industry at the moment, and it is a full-time job to keep up with it. So we're trying to, as best we can, sort of bypass that horizon scanning and just point out the bits that are relevant for community and local energy stakeholders, so they can, if they want to, respond to the consultations and keep up to date with the developments that are most relevant to them. And out of that also, we decided to support the local energy bill campaign that's running in this country by Power for People. because as a bill, that is a principle to enable community groups to supply their local area, and that is definitely a principle that we're seeing that our stakeholders want. So therefore, we decided to support that bill. Right, next slide, please. Right, so that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour for me, but that's everything that we're doing, the background to our strategy and the stuff that we're trying to do to support community and local energy groups in our region. If you want to keep up to date with our activities, you can sign up to our newsletter on our website. And if you are in our region and developing a project, please get in touch and talk to us. Right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. I'd like to give the floor to Vitas. Move to Lithuania now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for possibility to say some words about very flexible and very wide net metering system in our country. But first of all, a few words why it happened in our country. We have exceptional situation that 75% of electricity we have to import from outside and mostly from Russia. And it happened that before entering European Union, we had a very huge nuclear power station, Soviet station, but we had to close it. And instead of exporting country, we became importing country, and governments were thinking what to do. And of course, nowadays, last government made decision. Very strong movement to renewables. First slide, please. And in our energy strategy, which was approved 2 years ago, it is target to reach 100% of electric production from renewable sources. Next slide. It is easy to say that to produce electricity from renewables, but how to reach such result? And next step was to move very with big energy to expand producing consumers movement and net metering system. Next slide, please. Before. And net metering system works in many countries, but they have many limitations in other countries because mainly from because net metering decrease income from energy taxes from consumers, and financial officers usually are against net metering system, but sometimes people forget that if we are implement principle polluter pays, then every consumer which consumes electricity from fossil fuel, it is polluter in the end of the day. Therefore, the producing consumer do not pollute, and he don't emit CO2, and mainly that he creates from his own money, creates energy power, and therefore it some help to net metering system, and for prosumers it is reasonable. And in Lithuania were opened, as I said, very wide possibilities. Every private or legal person can use net metering system and to be prosumer. But most impressive that limit now it is 5 100 kilowatts. When in other countries, mostly it is 5 or 10 kilowatts. In our country, opened gates 500 kilowatts. Again, interesting situation, not as in Greece, of course, that place of producing and consuming can be different. Then you can produce solar electricity in one part of the country and consume in other part of the country. Next, very interesting experiment that investor can create big power station, for example, 5 or 10 or 50 megawatts, and every person can buy small piece of such power plant and become owner of this, for example, 5 kilowatt from 10 megawatt power station and use at his home. This system started this year, and now it is very, consumers became very active to use that system. Next slide, please. But system, when you can use net metering up to 500 kilowatts, opened next very important possibility to green energy, to use electricity for heating. Directly usage, it is not very efficient, but in our case, you can produce electricity for example, for big house, multi-family house, which needs approximately 100 or 150 kilowatt of electricity. Then you can produce electricity in summer and use for heating and hot water in winter time using heat pumps. And it's open possibility to multi-family houses to become zero emission houses. Next slide, please. In next our webinar, I will explain our case more detail, but now it is possible to all electricity during metering system, and even all the heat produce I can say from the sky, and building becomes zero emission, and small building and even big building can be zero emission buildings. But it is not easy to attract people to how to explain for household that it is reasonable. Therefore, after much discussion, we agreed with government that it will be for the first experiments, which are part of our EU Heroes project, it will be 60% support for such solar PV and heat pumps. We name as modernization of energy system. It will be 60% of support for investment for modernization of energy system. Next slide, please. Concerning energy communities, as I said in discussion first part, in Lithuania, legislation came to force only a few years ago, and it is also similar yet as in Greece. You have to be non-profit organization, private persons, SMEs can be, and it is important that municipalities can participate and are interested to participate in energy communities. And only big energy companies cannot participate in energy community in our case. And it is interesting that municipality is obliged to announce where land plots can be used for construction of PV stations for energy community. But it's strange that in our legislation appeared one very big obstacle, that energy communities cannot use net metering system. And it is difficult to understand because in very wide net metering system in Lithuania, possibilities to use it for communities, it is close, but I think it is temporary and politicians will understand. Then in the end, next slide, please. In the end conclusions, I can say that this our prosumers and net metering system will help for Lithuania to reach provisions of EU Green Deal, and energy communities are in starting position, but I agree with our colleagues that it is necessary to explain much about possibilities of these energy communities, and much energy have to be to dissemination of good ideas. But my challenges is that it is very traditional skepticism for collective methods of producing and distribution, especially I think in all East European countries, because we remember what does it mean, kolkhoz, collective farm, and people very difficult come together to produce something or to distribute something. And again, there is not enough information. Therefore, best practices from other countries and would be very helpful to help people, communities to understand how energy communities can be helpful in the future of European green energy deals. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitas. I'd like to give the floor to Job Svens. Sorry, Job, that we've run over time a bit. I hope this is okay for you. The floor is yours.
Yep. Can you hear me already? Hello?
Yes, Job, we can hear you.
Okay. I've got 2 minutes, I see. So let's be quick. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce the Dutch legislation, the problems we had, the solutions that are temporarily there, and the solutions that will come based on, I think, one of the most advanced projects that we have in Europe right now, and that is Schoon Schip, from which you see a picture here. This is the picture taken in March 2020. Next slide, please. The whole idea started 11 years ago. The final realization 1 year ago, 2 years ago. It took 9 years of preparation. What we're talking about is a community of 46 households placed on 30 ships, 46 private PV systems, 46 separate real estate objects. It's important for the discussion later. 30 community-owned batteries. So they are on the ships, but they're owned by the community. 1 community-owned real estate object. 1 grid connection from the community to the grid of the DSO. 1 community-owned microgrid. And a centralized energy management system, which will probably step to blockchain in the near future. Next, please. What Schoon Schip wanted to do? It wanted to create a community, 46 households, which could locally balance demand and generation, and where necessary, using storage in the form of either heat or electricity. The next step would be trade electricity with all electricity markets, including and in particular the ancillary grid markets, such as the local unbalanced market and the frequency market, because having their storage components, they could very well earn money and make their own energy system cheaper by doing so. Very interesting to mention is that the connection of the local energy community to the grid was carried out as 1/3 of the power that the DSO would have put there, with all the obligations the DSO normally has. So there was an enormous money saving in the power of the grid and the price you pay for a connection. Next slide, please. To be locally balancing demand and generation, Schoon Schip would need the rights to operate a local grid, to do the metering on all the meters of the individual dwellings, to manage the demand response, to coordinate the generation and the storage thereof. Next slide, please. To be able to trade electricity on all electricity markets, they would need to have access to the grid, be regarded as a what is called in the Netherlands a significant grid user, and be allowed to offer in the ancillary services in the ancillary markets, which is the kind of the grid services markets. Next slide, please. When we look at what they need, on the left you have to do the balancing, the points I just mentioned, operation, metering, etc. And for trading, the access. And if you look at the Dutch legislation, there were several points which were not allowed, where we marked them with crosses. For operation of the grid, the Dutch law is very strict. It says only the designated operator can do so, and a designated operator is a DSO appointed for 10 years. Metering is the right, you might say, of the designated operator, and therefore management of demand response is also the privilege or right of the designated operator. Finally, to supply electricity to households, you need a license in the Netherlands, and you need to confine with a lot of rules, which as a small community and even more as an individual, if you would like to do peer-to-peer supply, is not feasible. So we saw that we had 4 crosses on our way to realize Schoon Schip. Next slide, please. Next slide. The solution at the time started in 2015, partly based on the demands, the requirements of the community of Schoon Schip, was the installation of a regulatory sandbox, the so-called experiment electricity law. And that allowed communities to own and operate their local grid, to provide maintenance, and operate the metering equipment. To provide, maintain, and operate the metering equipment, and trade electricity on all electricity markets. The delivering of supplying of electricity to an individual was not yet covered. So there had to be a deal with an electricity provider to be an intermediate to do that. These experiments could run for 10 years, and then the legislator would see again if the grid would have to be given back to the DSO, and it was limited to 10, maximum of 10 projects per year. Schoon Schip was one of them. Next slide, please. having this solved, Schoon Schip started to build and create the some floating neighborhood. And we came to other problems. The peer-to-peer trading for smaller was this, as I said before, could only go through a community, and that would have to have a contract with the official supplier. Customer protection made several things more difficult. One of them is every member of the community must have the right to step out of the community at any time and go to another supplier, which made the whole construction and the whole, say, contracts of the community quite complicated. And then we came across some other ridiculous law issues. One of them, the most ridiculous, is the new law against money laundering and financing of terrorism, where we found out that if you become a member of a community and the community works with you and you need things like the right to put something on somebody's ground, like in this case, the batteries, that would require a small change in the mortgage contract, and the mortgage contract would require a total analysis of whether the ultimate beneficial owner was in one way or another involved in money laundering or financing of terrorism. So that became a very difficult and financially negative point. This project could do it. Other projects were coming after. Similar were stopped because of that new law. I'll skip a little faster. There's another one which is important. That is the so-called real estate ownership, where some of the rules are such that we had problems of a community owning electricity on the property of somebody else. And we had to solve that too. Next slide, please. A few years ago, we saw the clean energy package coming along, and we saw that a lot of these problems that were experienced in the beginning by Schoon Schip were actually solved in these new directives, such as the member states shall ensure that renewable energy communities are entitled to generate, consume, store, sell renewable energy, including through power purchase agreements, share renewable energy within the community, get access to all relevant energy markets. So where you see that the experimental regulation, the sandbox, was opening up several possibilities for the communities, the new European directives are taking actually almost identical steps as the experimental regulation. Next slide, please. The other one, the electricity market directive, focused on also on production, distribution, supply, consume, aggregate, and store electricity as rights for the citizen energy communities, and also the access to the markets. Additionally, the electricity market directive said that member states could allow, if they wanted, communities to own and operate their own grid, which was also covered in the experiment sandbox. Next slide, please. So if you look at what the Netherlands has and what the clean energy package requires, is that where we have the crosses for what we needed, the clean energy package forces the Dutch legislator to take them away, with, of course, operation and ownership in brackets as an option. Next, please. I want to skip this one. Next, please. Yes, this is great. What is now happening, the Dutch government is transposing these directives into the Dutch law, which, as I said earlier in the meeting, actually comes down to taking the most important components of the experimentenregeling into law. And there's one funny thing, we are now talking with them with a certain frequency, direct discussions. And one of the interesting things, which I thought was very good, that the Dutch government is aiming at, is we are not actor-oriented, we are action-oriented. Actor-oriented means that we will install a new entity, being a citizen energy community or a renewable energy community. What the Dutch legislator has now decided to do is to allow actually everybody the provisions and the rights that are described in the Clean Energy Package, being the Energy Market Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive, but putting restrictions on using those provisions. And that means that we're not looking at what kind of entity it is, except that it has to get the rights, you have to fulfill some requirements. So the entity will not be in our law. The provisions will be in our law, and per provision, you will see described that you can get that provision if you are, and then you will see the description of the communities coming back. It's a different approach. It's slightly different, but I like it very much because the basis is that the law allows you to, and then you get the restrictions instead of setting up a new entity which has certain rights. Right now, grid ownership will not be a part, but instead, again, it's another way of solving it. The DSOs will be maybe forced to participate with communities in such a way that they can do everything the European Commission wants these communities to do within their community. So, which means allowing to do the demand-side management, to actually direct the electricity currents through the grid. And I think that I'm coming close to the end now. Next slide, please. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Job. And yeah, this brings us just about to the end of the webinar. I'm sorry that we've gone over time slightly. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers and to thank all the participants. And all the presentations will be available on our website, so www.euheroes.eu. There'll also be a recorded version that you can share with colleagues who were unable to be with us today. You can follow us on Twitter @EUHeroes. And yeah, I think energy communities will continue to play an increasingly important role in delivering a smart, flexible, zero carbon future. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm conscious we've already gone over time. So thank you once again. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Same space, same time. So 15th of July at 10:30 Central European Time on energizing community PV.
And if anyone is interested in seeing the written version of the policy recommendations when they come out, they will be posted on the EU Heroes website that you can see at the address you can see there. The final version will probably come out in August just because we're incorporating some extra feedback from the webinars. But happy to talk to anybody also after after the event. If it's helpful, drop us an email. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Graham. And thank you to our colleagues at EST for your efforts in organising the whole webinar. Okay, have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.